Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is actually the case of Libby Squire, who is quite a recent case, really. She was devastatingly taken at the age of 21 in 2019. It's even made even worse, I guess, by the fact that Libby didn't even know who actually, like, her murderer. She didn't know them at all. It was basically a stranger, and it was simply a case of her being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it proved fatal. This case was suggested by Ian by asking me to look into Pavel Relevics, so yeah, let's just get stuck in. Libby Squire was born on the 14th of June in 1997 to parents Lisa and Russ in Buckinghamshire in the UK. She was the eldest of the family's 4 children and was described as loving, down to earth. She was such an amazing person and such a caring person. She was actually a student at Hull University, where it said that she was very hardworking, and she'd actually chosen to be there to go to that university because she really liked the area, and it just struck a chord with her, and that's where she wanted to be, that's what she wanted to do, and so she did. She was just this wonderful person who had these massive dreams for a future. You know, she had a boyfriend called Chris Pike, he was a long-term boyfriend, and they'd often discussed how they were going to get married, how they were going to have kids and start a family. You know, they were discussing their future together. Again, she just had so many plans. She was going to go to university, study, and then, you know, eventually she would get the career that she wanted, she would get the family that she wanted, and she just knew exactly where she wanted to be, and she went for it. She was also described as being very social, and she loved nothing more than spending time with her friends, going out partying, things like that, like normal young adults do. Just going out and enjoying herself, really. It was in September of 2018 when Libby decided that she was actually going to go back to Hull University to finish her undergraduate degree in philosophy. So she's there for a few months. Let's jump to the 31st of January 2019 when she's actually planned to have like a drinking night with the girls. Now, they had come around, they're all around the house, they were all having pre-drinks, which a lot of people do nowadays because going out drinking is just so expensive. So a lot of people buy cheaper booze, they take it home, they drink it, and it makes their night a bit cheaper. So a lot of people do it. I used to do it. They then probably planned on hitting the town later on. So they had their drinks at home and they headed out to this nightclub called The Welly. It was very popular amongst sort of locals. They obviously had rules where if you were like too drunk or whatever, they wouldn't let you in. They also wanted happy punters, which who doesn't? Unfortunately, Libby was, by their standards, too drunk. She was very, very drunk at that point, so they would not let her in. And at that point, you've got 2 choices, really. The entire group can go home. Well, they could go to a different place. I don't know whether there was many other places, whether that was just like the local, but on the town normally there's a few places that they can go. So unless she probably wouldn't have been let in there either. If she was that drunk, none of them would have let her in. So maybe that's the reason why. But they're seeing it that they either have 2 choices. They all go home and finish their night when it's barely begun, essentially, or send Libby home, who was very, very drunk at this point, and it's probably the best place that she could have been, really. And then they can carry on with their night. They can go in the nightclub themselves, and that is what they decide to do. So they call a taxi. The taxi pulls up at 11:26, and they put Libby in the taxi, and they tell her it to take her home. She doesn't live very far away from town at all. Libby's gone, and then they go in the club and they carry on their night. They party, they have fun, you know, time goes on, and one of the girls, called Amelia, realizes that she has actually not received a text off Libby to say that she got home safe. Now, that is something a lot of people do. A lot of people will say, text me when you get home to make sure you're there. You know, it's very common, especially as far as my knowledge is as well anyway. So yeah, they were waiting for this text. They didn't really get it, and she began to worry as to whether Libby had actually made it home, because obviously if you don't receive that text, you're gonna worry. So she did. She decides to call a sort of roommate or something along those lines called Erin, who was at the house, and she was going to ask if they could check whether Libby got home. And Erin said that she did not. She wasn't home, and that, you know, they'd not seen her, sort of thing. So they got worried about that, because obviously they put her in a taxi to go home, and then this roommate is saying that she never got home, which is strange. So they ended up eventually going home. I'm not entirely sure what time they went home. And they started looking for her, looking around the local area. Obviously, she was pretty drunk. So maybe she had got out of that taxi and began wandering around. Maybe she didn't have a clue what was going on because she was very drunk. And that she just, I don't know, ended up on the street somewhere or anything. If you're that drunk, you could have taken shelter in a shed or on a park bench or anything. You could have wandered around and just decided to go to sleep, because sometimes when you're so drunk, you don't have a clue what you're doing. That's why alcohol can be really dangerous, because it does lower your inhibitions. It makes you fuzzy, essentially. Anyway, they're out looking for her and they don't find her anywhere. It is at 2:21 a.m. that they actually ring the police and tell them that, you know, Libby has vanished. They cannot find her anywhere. She never made it home after the night out. You know, she's missing. She's a missing person. And the police came out straight away looking for Libby. There was over 70 officers assigned to a case. People from the community, including 200 students, were all out looking for her. The police put work out asking the public to look inside the garages, sheds, anything like that where someone could have been sort of ended up, were to, you know, if they wanted to find shelter or something like that. It was very cold that night, apparently. Very, very cold. Like, I believe there was snow on the ground as well. So maybe she wandered out, didn't really know where she was freezing, and then ended up staying in someone's shed or garage or anything. So that's what they were thinking along those lines, and they asked the public to search them. They went ahead and searched bins, local farmlands, drains, just anywhere and everywhere they could think of. They were looking, but they didn't actually find her. They found nothing. Over the next couple of days, tips began coming in, and they also began coming in about one person. Now we'll get into that more a little bit further on. The police also were getting hold of CCTV, and as you can imagine, CCTV, they can go straight to sort of the time as to when she got home and look around the area and things like that, but a lot of cameras are zoomed really far out. You can only see figures. It's difficult, and it's difficult to piece it all together, and it takes a long time. So they were piecing together the CCTV that they found, but what they did find from that was they ended up getting the dash cam footage from the taxi that Libby took, which showed her reaching her door at 11:29 p.m. So Libby did actually get home. Also, witnesses came forward to corroborate that they also saw Libby arriving home. But then witnesses also said that it was as if she didn't want to, she didn't want to be home. She didn't want to go in and sit around doing nothing. Well, a lot of people just go to sleep after nights out on alcohol, but she didn't want to do that. And 2 minutes later, she left again. So where did she go? They looked on CCTV once more, and they just tried to sort of trace her movements and sort of get down her timeline as to what she did and where she went, if possible. So basically, she began walking towards Beverly Road. She was alone at that point. She got to the main road at 11:39, and basically, it was said that she actually fell over, because I believe this couple came forward to say that they actually found Libby on the floor and they picked her up and put her on a park bench. Now, they stayed with her for a bit, about 10 minutes, but then Libby kind of told them that she was fine and that they could go, etc. And they did. You know, they left because she'd asked them to, and so they did. Just under 10 minutes passed, and CCTV picks up a person walking past her on Beverly Road at 11:57 p.m. This person was a man, it turned out to be. So he crossed Bearsfoot Avenue, and in the footage, it was really hard to see this man. As I've said, CCTV can be zoomed out, etc. But they were using other cameras and things like that, and they were able to get an ID, especially from the tips that people were coming in as well, because those come into play too. They gave this man the name as well. They revealed his identity as well, I guess. So they're piecing it all together. They're piecing about her whereabouts. They're piecing about this person that was seen around the area with Libby. And they're finally going to get like an ID on this man. And it turns out that it was a man called Pavel Relevics. I think. I apologise if I've got the name wrong. And as I've said before, he was actually already on the police's radar because people had been ringing in after Libby had gone missing, and, you know, people started to see things that I guess they didn't really think about before. They were ringing in and saying that he was known around the area to be sort of watching women through windows. He was always targeting young women and doing horrible things out in the street, indecent exposure kind of things, you know, so they weren't good. Everything that was coming through to the police was not good. It was always towards sort of younger women, and Libby, a young woman, had gone missing. So they were already sort of beginning to think of him as a suspect. Pavel Relevics was a 24-year-old Polish man living in the local area after moving there in 2012. He was actually married with 2 children. He had a really good job. He was working as a butcher. And from the outside looking in, people just thought that he was a normal family man. Just a normal guy. And then obviously the police began to receive tips that led them to believe otherwise. He also got accused of burglary as well. He was literally stealing sexual things from people's rooms. So yeah, just weird, but okay. They basically found out that he seemed to be a sexual predator. And like I said earlier, unfortunately, Libby was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was freezing. She was probably upset. She really probably didn't know what was going on too much because she was drunk. And you can see that she was drunk because she's stumbling around in the CCTV footage. She was just very vulnerable at that time. And no, he struck, I guess. So on the CCTV, you see Pavel walk past Libby and down Beverly Road. She, as I've said, you can see her swaying about and things. She's not really very stable. And at one point, she actually ended up in the road. So she's drunk. You can see that. 30 seconds later, she continues to stumble down the road, and Pavel leaves Bestfoot Avenue, and then he begins to walk back on himself and in the same direction as Libby, but on the opposite side of the road. Another half-minute passes and he crosses to sort of meet her and intercept her. The CCTV shows the pair disappear into the grounds of a former nunnery. And then they are seen emerging from those grounds not very long after. Together and walking back up Beverly Road. At 12:02 a.m. they get back to Hayworth Street, and CCTV taken from a garage shows that Pavel went back to his car, which was around the corner, and he can be seen basically sat in the car for a bit, and another car then leaves, and he then leaves his car. So I don't know whether he was trying to like wait for there to be no witnesses, basically, because there was another car there, and once that had gone, he went back. That's what it seems like to me. The footage then shows 2 figures walking across the street, standing together, then heading towards Pavel's car. The garage surveillance, going back to that again, then catches Libby getting into his passenger car. I mean, you can't see very much, but you can make it out. Then Pavel gets in the driver's side and then he drives off. That was at 12:08 a.m. It turns out that that is actually the last footage of Libby. She was murdered shortly after that, so it's the last footage of her alive, which is obviously so sad. The police are trying to gather this case together and gather the evidence that they can, and against Pavel, really, because he is their only suspect at this point, and they want to arrest him. So they're gathering up all this evidence. He is a known predator. He is all over the CCTV, and he was the last one to be seen with Libby. On the 7th of February, they went ahead and arrested him for the potential abduction of Libby Squire, and they seized his car in the hopes that they would get more clues from that, or even any evidence to tie him in. It was on the 20th of March in 2019 when a fishing boat came across human remains in the Grisby docks on the Humbert estate. Police took the body and an autopsy was performed, and it was later confirmed that those were the remains of Libby Squire. At that point, she'd been in the water for like nearly 2 months. She was very decomposed. It was 6 weeks after she went missing, and when they found her body, she still had this gold necklace with a letter L on it around her neck. So the autopsy couldn't really find the cause of death. Again, she was very badly decomposed, and you know what water does to a body once it's been sat in it for a long time. So they couldn't actually find that fully, but they also didn't rule out asphyxia. She had bruises all over like her torso area and her thighs. And the toxicology report showed that she had no drugs in her system. Obviously, she had alcohol in there, and it was more than twice the legal limit for sort of driving. So this abduction case turned into a murder case, and they were then able to start gathering evidence against Pavel. A witness then came forward to say that the house actually overlooked a place called Oak Road Plains Field, and that she recalled hearing screams that same night after midnight. It was a little bit after midnight, I believe. She actually described them as blood-curdling screams, which is just so awful to even imagine. Police also found lip gloss, a screwdriver, and a hammer close to where she was last seen in a hedge, but it wasn't known at the time whether that was connected to the case, so they took that in too. They then began looking into Pavel more and tried to figure out his whereabouts a bit more. They found CCTV footage at a petrol station about 9 p.m. He was fueling up his car, and then he was going out checking around Oak Road playing fields to see whether, basically, it was clear. And when it was, he noticed there was nobody about. It was quiet and it was clear, and then he went out on the prowl to find his victim, which he had obviously pre-planned to take to that playing field. And unfortunately, Libby was that victim. She was vulnerable. She was probably freezing. As I've said before, she was drunk, and who knows what her state of mind was at that moment in time. I don't want to make assumptions, but obviously alcohol has a big factor on people's thought process, and what you would normally not do, you may do under the influence, if you know what I mean. So she was more susceptible to him, and he managed to convince her to get into his car, which is probably something she would have never done in a million years, but just the circumstances surrounding it, that night she decided to, unfortunately. He then drove her to the playing fields at about 12:11 a.m. and the witness hearing the screams just after midnight probably meant that those screams were Libby's, as he sexually assaulted her, and then he proceeded to strangle her. He did that until she lost consciousness. Now the thing here is that it's not known whether he did that enough to actually kill her, or whether she was just unconscious, because then he fled the area, he goes home, and he goes and runs himself a hot bath. Yeah, a freaking hot bath. Unbelievable. So he's there having his nice warm bath while Libby, if she isn't already deceased, she's out there for freezing to death, suffering. So basically it's not known whether she died as his strangulation or was knocked unconscious because of that and then died due to hypothermia. So that isn't actually known. But she was out there alone, and just, if she was still alive, just unconscious and just suffering hypothermia all that time is just horrific. Anyway, after his bath, he decides that he should move her body. So he goes back out, he takes her body and he dumps it in this water supply, which is close to where he was, and it eventually leads down to the whole river, which is where she was found 6 weeks later. He was also seen after this doing some things, some like indecent exposure. So he was just an evil, wicked man, this guy, seriously, and people had no idea about him. Those closest to him probably had no idea about him, and that is sad, devastatingly sad. On the 24th of October 2019, he was charged with the sexual assault and murder of Libby Squire. On the 11th February 2021, Pavel Relevics was found guilty of Libby Squire's murder, and when the jury read out the verdict, he showed no emotion whatsoever. He was sentenced to a minimum of 27 years in jail with the possibility of parole in 2048. This case is such a sad case. Libby went out partying with some girls, having fun, enjoying a night out. She had so many plans for her future, and then they were stolen away by this evil predator who was lurking around the streets for a victim just to feed his urges. It's just disgusting. I'm so glad that he was caught and put behind bars. Obviously that was too late for Libby, which is really sad, but At least he is away and he can do no more harm whilst he is there. Hopefully, in my opinion, he will never get out, because if he is a deviant sexual predator, he's always going to be that to me, in my eyes. Please don't take that as like a fact, because it's just my opinion. But yeah, that's what I think, at least. So I honestly hope he don't ever get out after what he did. Just don't let him go. Don't give him parole. Just keep him in there forever. And my heart goes out to Libby Squire's family. Obviously, they lost their little girl, and just so devastating. All the people around her that were affected by it, family, or friends, a boyfriend, it's just so sad. And then you've got Pavel's family, who, you know, probably didn't even know what kind of man he was, and to find out that for his children and things, it's just devastating. So my heart does go out to them as well. But yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Libby Squire. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time,